Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to another Tekken 8 video on the channel. I know it's been a while, but with us officially in the aftermath of Tekken 8, and having nearly 30 years worth of Tekken lore at our fingertips, one big question that did come to mind from Tekken 8's story especially was who was the strongest bosses in the franchise. And of course, naturally, how do they stack up to that of the rest? Now, one thing that I wish to immediately make clear is that this isn't based on their gameplay. This is purely based off the lore and the canon established in the franchise. Because if that was the case, then Shin, Akuma and Jinpachi would be at the very top of that list. So yes, in today's video, I will be doing an in-depth analysis of the bosses in the franchise, and then rank them according to their power level in the series. But there are a few rules going into this. It just stops things from getting super duper messy, and Tekken has a plethora of different bosses, secret bosses, non-canon bosses, and comic book spin-offs that have typically been cancelled or been non-canon. So to streamline this video and make more sense of things, I do have a few rules here. First and foremost, they need to be an end game boss, the final big bad at the end of an arcade ladder run. This will include characters within and outside of the canon, so individuals like Unknown are indeed a contender for this tier list. 2. We will be ranking those characters in their strongest form, as power levels largely fluctuate between characters from game to game. Thus, judging them at their strongest form allows for a more well-rounded understanding of their placement. Plus, we will be taking into account how some characters may have slightly been power crept out a bit, just due to the nature of the series always moving forward. And 3. Much like Unknown, non-canon and outside material will be taken into consideration here, just as it may give some underdeveloped characters a little more color. With that said, I will not be taking into account Tekken Blood Vengeance. Because, dear lord, how am I supposed to power scale this thing? Can you see this? It's a fucking Mokujin Kaiju! Plus, I will be excluding some of the arcade ladder endings, as they can vary from being narratively significant to very hokey and humorous. And fourth, and most importantly, this is all for fun. Please do not take this super serious or that I'm shitting on your character. This is simply what I believe to be the strongest bosses in the lore and canon. Please feel free to have a completely different opinion from mine, because honestly, I kind of like making these tier list videos, just because I like to hear your own thoughts and discussions on it all. Anywho, without any further ado, let's just jump right into things. To kind of build things up here, I will be going from installment to installment. So of course, to kick things off, we do begin with Heihachi Mishima, former head of the Mishima Zaibutsu and formidable patriarch of the series. Heihachi fought for his rise to power and retained that position for a very long time, being unmatched in his style of Mishima karate, and even created a tournament to cement his power. But such ambition and hubris did come at a cost, as it required the death of his father, as well as his beloved wife, Kazumi. This would send him down a dark path of insanity, as he learnt of the devil gene and how his son possessed this infliction. After trying to kill him, the two would battle time after time after time, with it all ultimately climaxing at the end of Tekken 7, where he would fall to the hand of his son no less. So with all of these accolades in mind, how does Heihachi stack up to the rest of the bosses? Well, he actually holds up really well, as following his defeat in Tekken 1, Heihachi actually goes on a very prolonged and prolific training arc. One that reaches its climax in Tekken 7, where he would obtain what I can only describe as an ascended Raijin form. Here, he becomes significantly stronger, allowing him to go toe-to-toe with Kazuya's higher devil form, and achieve feats of strength never seen before. It gives him the power he needs to knock out his son from his devil form. Admittedly, this form does kind of come out of nowhere, as it's never foreshadowed prior to Tekken 7, but if you think of it as the culmination of decades of training, and like the peak of what a human is capable of, Which makes sense because he has a little bit of that Mishima bloodline cheat code in him. It's not that crazy to believe that he would obtain such a form, especially after years of looking to harvest a super soldier form. So unlike some others that will feature on this list that may have been power crept out, Heihachi's continued hunt for power, even against his kin, really makes him one of the strongest in the franchise. And let's not forget his incredible feats of nigh immortality. He survived being dropped off a cliff, an explosion, and even took the Shun Goku Satsu to the face. Point is, his durability is superhuman, and for that, I can't think of a more fitting place than that of A tier. I firmly believe he's limited by being human. Something his kin show are the real differences between them. Even so, without the Devil Gene, he is still acknowledged as one of the strongest fighters on the planet, even by Claudio, someone who has dedicated their entire life to studying and battling Devil. Thus, I feel like A tier is a very comfortable space for him here. Moving on, we do have another Mishima here, and you can all see this one coming from a mile away. Kazuya Mishima, child of Heihachi and Kazumi Hachijo. Kazuya would inherit his mother's devil blood, becoming one of the most tyrannical faces within the franchise. And that's saying a lot considering the series. With the devil gene flowing through his veins, Kazuya was always bound for greatness. But roll in a little bit of that Mishima blood, and an endless lust for vengeance and control. Kazuya is arguably the most dangerous threat the series has ever faced. Originally framed as the protagonist of the series, he was always going to be a formidable force. But to have him turn against such a role, he became a far better villain than he ever was a hero. The mystery then became just how much of that is Kazuya, and just how much of that is the Devil Gene's influence. So with this many credentials next to his name, where does he stand? Well, he is without a doubt S tier. He is a near-perfect genetic hybrid of some of the strongest beings in the franchise. Whilst definitely not the strongest, his accolades nearly trump out everyone else's, as he fought and defeated his father, went toe-to-toe with the Devil Gene's progenitor, Azazel, and of course he fought Akuma and survived. Although we don't know how canon the bonus Shin Akuma fight is, keep in mind that he did all of this before obtaining his final devil form of True Devil. In fact, let's touch on this man's devil forms because they're kind of like Super Saiyan level. Kazuya's original devil form is very simple and just very to the point. It's a very purple form where he obtains a pair of wings as well as a pair of horns. It makes its first appearance in Tekken 2. And despite it having given Kazuya a second win, it is not nearly enough to defeat his father, as once he is defeated, the devil form is actually split in two, as its other half would be passed on to Jin Kazama. So during the events of Tekken 4, whilst yes, Kazuya still does retain the devil gene, he is significantly weaker, actually losing to his father during the finals. But since that time, it's very clear and very evident that he's grown significantly stronger, especially by the time of Tekken 7, entering a state that's much more akin to that of its sister series, Soul Calibur, than what we've ever seen of his previous purple form. And with both Heihachi and Kazuya having grown so much stronger since the events of Tekken 2, it can be believed that this form was way stronger than the one in Tekken 2, which was a more complete one. Even so, with that in mind, he did not defeat his father. Kazuya's strongest devil form is the one he obtains during Tekken 8, where upon defeating Azazel, he's able to absorb his very being, becoming a true devil, something so much more than that of his original form. In fact, he was creating a Frieza death ball just so he could wipe off a small Japanese island. That is insane. So needless to say that Kazuya's placement in S tier is nearly uncontested. Maybe minus one character who we will see later on. But his placement here on this tier list is without a doubt well earned, especially for one of the older protagonists of the series. Moving along, we do have a fun little secrets pick from Tekken 2, and that is Angel. And for those unaware, This was a secret boss that could only be exclusively played against if you used Devil Kazuya. She was designed to replace him as the final boss of his arcade run. But in terms of lore and canon, Angel's a really weird one to kinda talk about here. Because despite her debut in Tekken 2, she would actually be later retconned by Harada, and then kind of be relegated to that of a non-canon character, only appearing in the tag games, as well as a non-canon spin-off comic book line, Tekken Blood Feud, where upon meeting her, she was already captured by Jin and incapacitated. Her greatest feats of strengths are where she's defeated Devil Kazuya, but please do keep in mind that these are ladder endings, something intended as a reward for completing them. The only other display of power she's ever shown is during Blood Feud, where she resurrects a handful of fighters in its climax. Yeah, we do see her fight Devil Jin, but as we see during the start of Tekken 8, Devil Jin wasn't strong enough to defeat Kazuya's purple form. So considering that Devil Jin's and Angel's clash finishes in a stalemate, I really don't see Angel as that strong of a character here. Whilst definitely an Achilles heel to the Devil Jin, in comparison to her 8 counterhalf, she's more of a stepping stone for what we have now. Thus, with her flip-floppy nature, lack of lore, and honestly, just real lack of character development, I must reluctantly put her in C tier here. As conceptually, whilst she is indeed very important in the grand calculus, it does all sadly come at the expense of her own time in the franchise. So with Angel out the way, we now get to move on to our next boss here. And this is one that really helped usher in a new age and dynasty for Tekken. I'm talking about none other than Ogre. And oh man, what a character we have here. Ogre was a hell of a boss to the franchise, and honestly one that really shaped up the foundation of it, as once unleashed went on a murderous rampage, one that forced the next generation to rise up and hold their own against such a devastating force. He is pivotal to the series to a number of different characters, as he was responsible for the death of King and sidelining others like June and Beck, being inadvertently pivotal in the rise of Jin Kazama and his training under Heihachi. Whilst definitely a bit overlooked now, as Tekken 3 is older than some of its current fans, the repercussions of his slaughter is still felt to this very day. And with that said, and as more time has passed by, we've actually learnt more about Ogre, and that he isn't quite as impervious as previously conceived, as he was defeated by the likes of June, Paul, and of course Jin. And this is what I would say actually makes him quite hard to place on the tier list, because due to his early appearance, he has been a little bit cropped out from what we have at the top here. It's a very strange and very hard thing to pin down, especially knowing that Ogre also has his true Ogre form, something that sadly never actually properly explored in game. So with all of this in mind, I feel very comfortable with putting him in B tier here, as his impact on the series cannot be denied, but he is kinda limited with how much we actually know of him. I believe that's kind of the beauty of the mystery surrounding Ogre. We know so little about him, despite him being such a formidable force. Now, our next big bad here, who actually isn't that bad at all, is Jinpachi Mishima, former head of the Mishima Zaibotsu, creator of Mishima Style Karate, and damned soul of the entire line. Jinpachi might arguably be the least deserving character that ever fell to Heihachi's hand. Yet, his suffering was not over, as whatever was left of his being was possessed by a vengeful spirit, using his body as a vessel to carry out its carnage. In a final-ditch effort, Jinpachi would create the 5th King of Iron Fist tournament, hoping that someone could finally put him to rest. And that dream would be fulfilled by his own great-grandson no less, finally marking the true definitive end to his character. Now, this is a very hard one for me to do, because on the gameplay front, Jinpachi was designed to wreck your shit. Like, there's no kind way to say this. Along with this, originally when Jinpachi was released, he was believed to actually have the devil gene. This is something that would later be retconned and changed down the line. But even so, with that in mind, and the design and intent behind his creation, it does give us an idea of what we could expect from him here. The only real issue is that we never actually get to see a true display of that power. So in order to gauge what he's truly capable of, let's talk about what makes him so strong. So first off, he's a Mishima. These guys are kind of built to last, and if anything, are kind of a super race in themselves. But with Jinpachi being able to flawlessly blend Mishima-style karate with that of his supernatural demonic counterhalf, he becomes a force to be reckoned with. As keep in mind that the only person to essentially defeat him is the protagonist of the series. I think if it was anyone else outside of a Mishima, this may not have been possible. With that in mind, he did of course fall to his son. So to kind of rub salt in that wound here, it does only feel right that I place him beneath Heihachi. As whilst I definitely think he's stronger than Ogre, I think the years of training and experience on Heihachi just allows him to have that edge. Now the next boss on the tier list here is Azazel, progenitor of the devil gene and great evil of the franchise. Azazel is the oldest being of the franchise, and thus comes from an age where he was seen as God King, overlord of the world as we know it, and had appointed devils as his generals as he conquered land after land. Eventually, in time, his reign would inevitably come to an end, especially with the Age of Man taking fruition, being sealed away to hopefully be forgotten to time. And for a while, he was. That is, until he returned from the chaos amassed by Jin Kazama, looking to continue where he had left off. It would only be by the hands of Lars Alexanderson, Heihachi's estranged son, as well as Jin Kazama, where he was finally defeated. Now, despite his very important role to the series, Azazel's kind of the living epitome of power creep in Tekken, as despite him having this unbelievable haunting awe around him, he's kind of a bitch. And yes, the devil blood did come from him originally. It looks like everyone from that time onwards has simply surpassed what he was capable of. I mean, hell, even Kazuya acknowledges this before defeating and absorbing him. He feels like a relic from the past, one out of time, and simply outclassed by the sheer level of his descendants. So because of this, I'm understandably gonna put him at the tail end of B tier. I simply think that in comparison to everyone above him, he's simply outmatched and outclassed. Moving on to that of the tag games, we now have Unknown, a mysterious forest spirit that has taken host of the infamous Jun Kazama. Now truth be told, very, and I mean very little is known about Unknown as a character, as she's only ever featured in the tag games, which aren't really narratively rich. So there is very little to actually talk about her here. In fact, there was only one point in time where this character's origin was going to be explored, and that was in a non-canon comic book line that would be cancelled after one issue. Along with this, Unknown does have two different forms, one with and one without the Wolfstand. As for the reason why she lost it, that is yet another thing unexplored. So it's really difficult to kind of get an idea of her placements here. Because of this, I do have to largely rely on her host, Jun Kazama, as a way to kind of rank this character, while still simultaneously keeping in mind that she's possessed by an unknown forest spirit. Due to the lack of information surrounding her, it makes her probably the hardest character to place on this tier list here. With that said, and knowing that she was able to defeat Ogre during the events of Tekken 3, I believe we can put Unknown above Ogre here. Truth be told, we simply don't know enough of this character to kind of place her in A, thus I feel B to be a little bit more appropriate for her. Going back to Mishimas, we do have Kazumi here, wife of Heihachi and mother to Kazuya. She's a descendant of the Hachijo line and enforcer of global protection, as she herself married into the Mishima line, hoping to guide her husband from his path of destruction, a mission that she would ultimately fail in. With her hand forced, she had to fight Heihachi to the death, hoping to save the future of the world. Yet, all of these efforts would be in vain, as she perished to his hand, even in her devil form. Now, truth be told, Kazumi is a bit of a flash in the pan here in terms of narrative importance. And as devil wielders go, she is relatively weak, as the only recorded fight she has to date is against her husband, who absolutely smokes her. Although she uses Mishima-style karate, she isn't what I would call to be a true Mishima. And while she puts up a hell of a fight in her devil form, it isn't enough to stop Heihachi. Keep in mind, this death happened decades ago, long prior to his training arc from Tekken 2 onwards. Plus, he would be weaker at that point in time. So with all of these factors in mind, I do strongly believe that I don't have her on the tier list. Why don't I have her on the tier list? So, with this in mind, I feel like it's only appropriate to put her at C tier here. As kind of like Angel, there's very little to show, and I think kind of like Azazel, she might be just power crept out by how powerful some of the newer characters are. So I hope that kind of makes sense here, because I actually do quite like Kazumi, and I think she's quite cool. Now we get to move on to a very fun character that will give competitive players PTSD, and that is Akuma, master of Ansatsuken and the Dark Hado. Now Akuma himself is a very unique beast in the world of Tekken, because, well, he's a guest character. Yet even so, with that in mind, we don't really know what iteration or version of him this is. Because keep in mind that for the most part, Street Fighter and Tekken aren't known for sharing the same universe. Therefore, this is a singular shared character. So it's kind of hard to gauge what iteration of him this actually is. The only thing that we can kind of work off here is his gameplay style, with him retaining a lot of 4 elements. Thus, I will be using all of my knowledge of Akuma up until the events of 4, to kind of gauge where exactly does he rank here, and what does he do in this universe that allows me to place him around the tier list. Now, the strongest version of Akuma in this universe would actually be his Shin counterpart, a version of Akuma that is unlocked upon completing the campaign. Now, don't be fooled by the simplicity of his design, as whilst he doesn't visually look much different, his Shin form has allowed him to enter a near-perfect state, where he does increased damage, is significantly stronger, and his understanding of the Dark Hado is nearly unmatched. However, there is one really big drawback here, and that is that it's only ever largely explored through the game's gameplay. What I mean by this is that the Shin form itself is never truly explored in the lore and canon, but instead something more displayed through its gameplay. And this has kind of been done with every version of the character, as it's never been intrinsically canon to that of the series. I mean, hell, we don't even know if the end fight between Devil Kazuya and Shin Akuma is actually truly canon here. But what we do know of Akuma is that he was easily able to overpower Heihachi. And even after beating him, he is able to battle Kazuya and seamlessly take on his devil form. Thus, it wouldn't be hard to believe that his base form is easily in A tier here. But what I do think does spill him over into S tier is the sheer capability and power his Shin form grants him. A form that can contest with a higher devil form, and even the playing field. The only real discrepancy here is that we don't see him knock Kazuya out of his devil form, or battle an ascended Heihachi. But by taking into account Akuma's own history throughout the Street Fighter franchise, there's a reason why you've ever heard of him, or ever seen him. He's always held up in high esteem. So I will be ranking Akuma in S tier, as he's simply one of the strongest fighters in both universes. Now moving on, we do have our final boss here, and of course, it is Angel Jin. And let's just beating it to the punch. Like, he's just going at the top of S tier. Because let's face it, we all know that he was going here. Being the love child of Kazuya and Jun, as well as having been trained by Heihachi, made him the very best candidate to become the protagonist. He's the perfect hybridized mix of Mishima, Kazama, and Devil Blood that's given him the ability to take down anyone in his path. Defeat Ogre? Check. Defeat Kazuya and Heihachi? Check. Defeat his grandfather? Also check. Strike down the progenitor of the Devil Gene in a single punch? Check. Defeat a super version of his father after absorbing Azazel? Point is, Jin is a formula that's just built for success, entering a completely new form and level by using the Kazama's line of purification to obtain the Angel Form. It is the perfect counter to that of the Devil Gene, and even without the Devil Gene, he has a few accolades under his belt. So whilst I will agree that the Devil Gene does a lot of the heavy lifting in the bigger situations, it can't be denied that he's done so much without it. And if the end battle against Kazuya is anything to go by, it's that by now fully embracing the Mishima style and combining it with his own and the traditional Kazama style, he now has a unique hybrid that blends down every aspect of this character's journey and heritage into one being. So Jin sits at the very top of this list, and rightfully so. This is a character that has had decades of build-up. So the real question now is, will he stay at that place at the top, considering that the Devil Gene is now gone? Well, we will simply have to wait and see. So with that said, this has been it for my boss's tier list. And I really do hope you have enjoyed this, as it was a lot of fun to put together, but I can tell it's gonna be an absolute nightmare to edit. So with that said, if you really did enjoy this, please do give this video a thumbs up, as it does go a very long way here, and I do super appreciate it. So with that said, down in the comments below, what is your own Tekken tier list? I want to hear what you have to say. But for now everyone, that has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care everyone.